Greetings, my name is Lachlan, and if this is the first video of mine that you have ever watched, I'd like to apologize because this is going to be much darker than the things I usually talk about. Today I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself in relation to being called an inspiration, because you see, I am a 34-year-old South African living with a disability known as quadriplegic cerebral palsy. This disability is lifelong and is the result of severe brain damage, which affects my balance, muscular tension, and capacity for speech, among other things. Now, the reason I bring up the word inspiration is that it's a term quite frequently applied to me because I am a qualified journalist, have worked in the field, and achieved various other things usually considered impossible for someone living with my condition. So it's something that people will quite regularly say when they come into contact with me. But I have grown to profoundly hate that word. And I'm going to explain why by sharing some pretty intimate details about my life. Now, as I start this, I know that the likelihood is that very few people will actually watch more than a minute of it. That's just the nature of life in the social media ecosystem. But I'm doing it anyway, because if it helps one person or gives one person a useful perspective, then the effort is worth it. So, as I said, I am a qualified journalist. In fact, it is what I studied at college and have worked in traditional newspapers as well as other related fields. I was able to do this work as a full time journalist with the help of my second cousin, who, even to this day, functions as my primary caregiver. However, he is now in his mid 70s and dealing with his own health issues, so he is no longer able to facilitate the kind of freedom I need to do that sort of work. Given this, as well as the fact that journalism as a field has shrunk to an immense degree, firstly because of market pressure, and now especially because of the emergence of AI, jobs like that are simply few and far between. And even if somebody wanted to hire me as a journalist, they probably could not afford to pay me enough for me to be able to afford the facilities and the assistance I would need to do the job. But aside from my professional background, I want to tell you about the personal realities that I live with because of this disability. I've discussed some of this stuff in previous videos, so if you are somebody who does regularly watch my content and you've heard this stuff before, I'm sorry, but like I say, I'm trying to do something very specific here. I, like many other disabled people in South Africa, was educated throughout the course of my childhood at schools specifically designed to cater for children with physical disabilities. Broadly speaking, the South African education system does not integrate disabled children alongside regular ones. And so, what this means is that for the bulk of my formative years, I had to attend schools that were not within my local community. One of the negative effects of this is that I was never able to form a close circle of local friends, um, and I never had those kind of lifelong bonds. And even when I went to college, which the college I attended was just a standard college with no particular facilities for the disabled, even that was far from where I lived. The upshot of all this is that I have led a very solitary and lonely existence, and that had a profound effect on how my psyche has developed. For instance, I have known uh, since about the age of, I'd say, 17, that I wanted a girlfriend. I say girlfriend because I don't just mean a girl to have sex with. I have known since I was 17 that I wanted a committed romantic partnership leading to marriage and a family. Unfortunately for me, the closest thing I've ever experienced to a genuine romantic connection was a month-long relationship, I guess you could call it, with a. Sorry about that. I just hit the hooter button on my wheelchair. I'm not gonna edit that out because that is just part of what it is to be in a wheelchair with this disability. Sometimes your hands do weird shit. Anyway, as I was saying, the closest thing I've ever experienced to a genuine romantic connection was an ill fated month long relationship with a woman who was severely bipolar. While I was with her, she had a bipolar episode, had a violent ex boyfriend throw me out of her house. I should clarify that I took my first plane ride ever to the opposite end of South Africa in order to live with her, because she had said that she was willing to care for me and to make sure that all my physical needs would be met. At the time, my parents didn't know that there was a romantic um, component involved, and suffice it to say, it was deeply uncomfortable when this woman had a bipolar episode, had a violent ex boyfriend literally throw me out of the house, and then later, because she was worried about what I might say about her, threatened me with a false rape charge. I don't talk about this in or out of a desire to get revenge on this woman, despite the fact that she seriously damaged my faith in people, and that the experience is one that I've never fully recovered from. I hold no ill will towards her. I don't view her with any malice or hatred. I never want to see her again, but that doesn't mean I want anything bad to happen to her. I share these things because I want you to understand that for many years, I have had a deep desire for true emotional connection. In fact, it was this very desire that blinded me and made me ignore obvious red flags that I should have noticed. I should mention that I wasn't just like a dumb teenager when this relationship took place. I was in my mid 20s at the time, so I was plenty old enough to realize that the situation was bad. But this being my first and only chance at romantic connection, added to the fact that she was a beautiful blonde woman who, for a month, made me feel like the most special person in the world, was enough to have me ignoring my rational mind and just doing whatever I could to maintain that feeling. My purpose in telling you this is to illustrate how lonely my life has been and currently is. Another fine example of this is that when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and South Africa, along with most of the world, was locked down for the better part of 2 years, the isolation that caused a lot of people to sink into drug addiction, alcoholism, and suicide really didn't have that much of an effect on me. Because even when our lockdown conditions were at their most stringent and authoritarian, they weren't as severe as my daily reality. I go months without being able to leave the house. And as I said earlier, because my cousin can no longer actively transport me from place to place, and because I'm in my 30s now, most of the local friendships that I had established when I was working as a journalist and doing other things have faded because most of the people I know, although we are not on bad terms, have drifted away from me. And I can't blame them for that because this is the age, your late 20s and early 30s, when people are getting married and having kids. And that is what they should be doing. So I'm not going to sit in judgment of them and say, oh, these friends of mine weren't friends because they abandoned me. No, they didn't abandon me. They are simply doing what human beings are supposed to do. Nonetheless, it is a very difficult thing to deal with, and living as I do feels very much like living on an island that is separated from the rest of the world. Because of this, I deal with what is honestly daily suicidal ideation. I have come to the point in life where I no longer fear death, and the thought of dying actually brings me comfort. Now, I know that for a lot of people, hearing me express that is frightening, but you need not panic. I am not a danger to myself or anyone else for two main reasons. I would never attempt to end my own life, firstly, because I don't have a way to guarantee that doing so would be successful. And I certainly don't want to try something like that, survive it, and then be in a worse situation than I already am, because I'm already a quadriplegic. I don't need to be making things any worse. Beyond that, though, I am morally opposed to suicide because of the damage I know it would do to the people who care about me. And there are people who care. It's just that with the way my life works, my closest friends are in other countries, and my main method of interaction with them is via social media. It saddens me every day that because of my circumstances, I will likely never be able to travel and meet the people that mean so much to me. I want to talk a little bit more about the topic of relationships because I want to be absolutely clear what my stance is in that regard. I do not bear any ill will towards women in general because I've never been able to find a partner. Finding love is difficult even among normal people. And as somebody with a severe disability, I am fully aware of the fact that I don't meet the criteria that most women are looking for in a man. Despite the popular modern rhetoric of women being strong and independent and capable of living entirely self-sufficient lives. When you get down to it, you know that that's bullshit. Women desire and are biologically driven, in most cases at least, not all, but most, to seek men who are bigger than them, stronger than them, and can provide for them. Because of my disability, I don't really meet these factors or these requirements. That is not a woman's fault. As sad and lonely as my life is, I'm not going to turn around and become an angry incel and put all of my problems at the feet of women. I also, because of the prior experience I told you about, don't fully trust myself to act responsibly should the opportunity for a real relationship come up. I fear that I would once again ignore my rational mind because it feels good to be wanted. That's a big thing for me because the nature of my disability and how disconnected I feel from regular people and often even my own physical body means that I have a deep desire to feel wanted and connected to someone. So I am prone to risking just about anything to enjoy that feeling, which I know for a fact is psychologically unhealthy and not fair to force any partner to have to deal with. Now, you might be wondering why I live with my second cousin and not my parents. So I will clarify that. My parents are decent people, and when I was a child, they provided a safe and stable home for my older brother and myself. However, I do not believe that either of them have the facility to truly understand what I go through or who I am as a person. I am very different from my parents, and this has led to quite a lot of emotional conflict over the years. But as far as I see it, I have a responsibility to maintain a friendly and cordial relationship with them and not to treat them with excessive resentment or anger. After all, they, like me, are just people doing their best. So, I guess it might seem strange that I would dump all this out, particularly on the internet, where anybody might see it. And I know that some people might take some sort of perverse pleasure and mock me for expressing these things. But, as I say, if it helps even one person that I've talked about these things and also makes people think twice before simply calling somebody with a disability an inspiration, then I will feel as though my job is done. One final thing I will say about the whole inspiration issue is I know that when people say it, they mean well. But understand that from my perspective, what someone is doing when they call me an inspiration without knowing the realities of my life that I've just shared here, what they're doing is stripping me of my humanity. If you, as someone who doesn't know me very well, says, "Wow, Lachlan, you're such an inspiration. You're such an example to me," what you're doing is you're stripping me of my humanity. I'm no longer Lachlan the person. I've become this thing in your mind that you can look to as an example of how to live. And while some might take honor in that and be proud of serving as an inspiration, which I will admit is something I have fed into in the past, which is partially my fault, so I accept responsibility for that. At this point in my life, I just would really like to be seen as a person and to be acknowledged as a full human being with needs, wants, and desires, just like everyone else. I hope that whenever you're seeing this, you have a pleasant day, night, or whatever time it is for you. And for now, farewell.